Hey guys, I'm Ivanna.
And I'm Derek.
And this is
Til
Till Kingdom
Kingdom
Come.
Come.
Welcome back to another podcast. It has been a little bit, but we really like to bring you guys these. So Derek is playing with his tablet because we're going to share with you
The sermon that I preached on Wednesday, a few days ago.
points of it so we could chat about it.
Yeah, not the whole thing.
I don't have the whole thing, but it was great. It was really beautiful.
Ooh, it went right up to the notes. Here we go. Well, the message that I preached on was titled, "Why Do You Want to Go?" And it was a conversation that I was having with about 100 dancers that Vincent Hardy, shout out to Zion Dance Project, had informed me that a lot of them were really just like, I want to go to the mission field. I want to
Be in full-time ministry.
And
I mean, we get it.
yeah, obviously. But it was like 2 days till they were done. Like the Lord started to just bring this question up to ask them, like, why do you want to go? I knew that they would have given me 1,000 reasons to do it. The question really was whether or not they would have given me the most important one, which is our topic tonight.
Yeah, and they would be good and valid reasons as to go, the Great Commission, the call to be in ministry, reaching the lost, like all of those are really valid things. But I think what you focused on, which was so beautiful, it's like the main point as to why Christ came.
Yeah, and I really wanted to correct a perspective that a lot of Christians and even the world has a worldview about missions that I think we have to adjust. And the only way that we can adjust it is internally. So we have to be the example first so that the world can see what truly being on mission means and why we go. Like you said, purpose of the gospel. If we were to sum up his why, because we all know his what, but we can sum up his why, it would be done in one word. And what would that word be, baby?
That word would be union.
Yes. And that is really what I wanted to focus on. And you said that you really got touched by a specific section of the teaching. I really am gripped with the Jesus Freaks book.
Book of Martyrs.
The Book of Martyrs. I quoted a few early church fathers, Tertullian being one of them, who said that the seed of the church is the blood of the martyrs. And I think a lot about how the sensitivity of having the freedom that I have today is very well connected to not only the blood of Christ, but the blood of missionaries who decided it was worth coming to America and evangelizing the gospel. And whether or not we want to find fault in history textbooks and stuff, the reality is that martyrs died to give us the freedom to have the gospel here and do it freely. And I wanted people to understand that they didn't do that because of some zeal, that they just needed to go and make disciples. They did that because they were willing to lavish love at their final moments. And I use an example of a 16 or 17-year-old girl whose name we will never know, who was forced to spit on the Bible. And that was her way of telling the Communist Party.
She was like denouncing Christ.
Yeah. After watching, I think like 4 people do it before her, she wept, overcome with love. She wiped all of the spit off of the Bible, and I believe she kissed it, or if not, she just said, "What have they done to your holy word?" And moments afterwards, the communist soldier walked up and shot her in the head. And I connected that story, because she is nameless and faceless, to the story of the woman who broke her alabaster jar over Jesus' feet. What Jesus says in Matthew 26:6, I think it's so profound. He says, wherever this gospel goes in the world, this will surely go along with it. And he also mentioned that this was a good work that was done unto him. And I think that, and this is one of the quotes that I kind of like said that night, which is, I believe that the gospel is married to lavish devotion. You cannot find a story where the gospel was being truly presented both in power and in truth without lavish devotion being the root of that the love sickness, the love of the person who is demonstrating the gospel had to have been overcome by love and nothing more, because of their revelation of their union with God. And you said one thing that really spoke to you, maybe you want to expand upon it, is what it did to Judas and the disciples on that very night, which, for those of you who don't know, that was Passion Week. So this whole experience was happening really close to Jesus's death. And so this preparation that she was doing was not only symbolic and prophetic and was of the right timing, it was stirring up a lot of animosity, some of Jesus's inner circle.
Well, I think just to go back to the point we were talking about union. So I think a lot of Christians struggle with this, like, what's my purpose? It's my calling, and that could be above everything. And even for us in this season, as we've said it, like on the vlog before, like we're having to step into marketplace and stepping away from full-time ministry and figuring out what it looks like to not be a missionary couple that's married and traveling the world, but still understanding our union with Christ. And so in that place, understanding that my devotion to Christ means that I extravagantly worship him in anything I do, whether that's at work or in my marriage to you or in a friendship. The understanding that that union can never be broken and that I stand as Christ. So it's like my purpose, my calling is to be in union with Christ, to belong to him, to look like him to other people, to receive love from him so that I can give love to other people, to minister to him. It's all around Christ and the understanding of our union. And so when you look at Mary and she lavishes this extravagant fragrance on him, she's anointing him for his death. She is giving it all away, knowing that she belongs to him, that she has had an encounter with the Messiah, with the man. And mind you, this is even before she receives the Holy Spirit in Pentecost. And so in reality, she is doing this out of just the history that she had with him. Historians have said that Mary of Bethany, it would have been a year's wages. You know, like I think about it now and I'm like, man, sometimes the Lord will ask me to give sacrificially. And I start thinking about all our bills. Like she gave away her whole salary. And then I've also heard it said that it was like she knew what it would have been like to anoint him for his burial. And this is something I think she would have known by the Spirit, or something she would have done extravagantly out of love, but not necessarily. I think she would have done it because she knew the cost when Lazarus was raised from the dead. Like she saw him. Yeah. She knew him. She was intimate with him. And so everything she did was like extravagantly unto him. And this is something that Jesus would have smelled on himself at the cross. It's something that the Roman soldiers would have smelled on him. It was costly. It cost a Christian everything to die and live as Christ wherever they are, to make that the calling.
Yeah, I was reading another story, and the martyr said the more that he and his friends got tortured, they started to have more pity and empathy to their torturers. And they said, in the same way that when a flower is bruised by the heel of someone who steps on it, that at the very moment it is crushed, it releases a small perfume to hit the person who has ultimately crushed the flower. They were finding that the more that they were being crushed, the more they yearned for their torturer's salvation, the more they yearned for, and really just cared for it. And the illustration was so beautiful because I had never looked at it that way, but we're caught up, and I'm even realizing this now. Like I was speaking to these 100 people thinking that they're not struggling with the everyday things that the typical American Christian is struggling with, which has nothing to do with whether or not they're going to go and die for the gospel. It's more so of like, am I going to believe him today? And like these stories, they remind me of how, and I don't mean this to be insensitive, I actually mean this to find sensitivity towards the things that I'm dealing with, but that it's so little in comparison to what people are going through. And it doesn't diminish what I go through, but it helps me realign my focus to the union. I think one of the reasons why I love that you brought up even Lazarus is because that experience gave Mary the confidence, the same confidence that Jesus had in John 16, John 15, which was, I'm willing to pour out my love onto my disciples who I know are going to deny me. They're going to betray me. They're going to run away. They're going to fall asleep, because Jesus knew where he came from. He knew where he was going. He knew who he came from, and he knew who he was going back to. And in the same way, in John 17, when he's praying for us to receive that same relationship, that if he is in the Father and the Father's in him and they're in us, and it's better that he leaves earth so that Holy Spirit could come, that this divine Godhead is living inside of us so that we would have the confidence of our new creation, our everlasting glory, and who we would return to if anything were to happen. It would redefine the way that we look at our trials, and it would redefine the way that we look at the problems that go on in our life, so that we wouldn't maximize them, but that we would actually maximize the Lord and our union to him in the face of all of those trials. And I'm recognizing that steady is the new fast, and I need to actually wind myself back and remind myself that a lot of the American Christian messages, they would frustrate me because it feel like we were going back to the basics. But the reality is that we need that. Like, we need the basics. We need to be told, yeah, it's frustrating that your tire popped on the way to work and you got a tardy sticker on your schedule, but Christ is better, and Christ paid for you to have union so that you could feel better about that. Like, I don't mean feel better, but
It's just not that big of a deal. Like there's eternal things, and
yes.
then there's like worldly things, and he just surpasses it. I think it's just really beautiful. The idea of union is the point of the gospel, that you would do everything from overflow. And we find that in Ephesians, like it says it, like his will, that all things would be united unto him, both in heaven and on earth. And so through what Christ did, we now get to do things from the rest of the finished work of the cross, from the resurrection. We talk about this a lot, but it's like now we preach this like, well, you're a missionary when you go to work if you're a principal like our friend Ryan, or if you work at a company like me, or if you're a restaurant like you represent Christ to those people because you're in union with him and you've been raised as Christ. And so the beauty of that is that a soccer mom that's washing dishes is as much in her purpose as the missionary that's running a crusade in Africa. And it's like she's raising those three kids faithfully. She's pouring Christ into them. She is really making Christ their foundation. And he will look at her and say, well done, good and faithful servant. It's the faithful. Like, he doesn't say, well done, good and you went to every nation servant, or you spoke at every platform. So it was his faithful servant. Like, will you be faithful to remind yourself and actually live out the union that you have with Christ when it doesn't look like a pulpit, when it doesn't look like speaking engagements, when it doesn't look like a church, when it doesn't look like missionary work? It's all about being and maintaining your posture of union with him, and understanding that like it is now Christ who lives. And I think that's the way that you let people see Christ. Like, you step into any situation and you let him lead, instead of your flesh, instead of your feelings, instead of your desires, instead of your dreams, because those things are fading, but your union with Christ is eternal. I think that is what is so beautiful, and it's so counterculture. Like, ministry is not the goal. The goal is the fullness of union with Christ, which he achieved, and he is sanctifying you, and he will glorify you one day to be fully that, so that you will be a clean and pure bride.
I can feel the Lord impressing this even on me now. He's saying that judgment of union is only left to me. And I think a lot of the church is caught up in this trying to judge what true union looks like. And because union is solely supposed to be experienced, it's not supposed to be judged. We measure and compare people's work rather than their devotion. And if someone's working hard we assume that their devotion matches their work. Then we judge that person's relationship to God based off of their work. And it's so backwards, because it's what Matthew 7:23 is all about. It's what Christ is saying at the end times to Christian believers, that look him in the eye and say, did I not prophesy in your name and cast out demons in your name? And Jesus looks at them and says, depart from me, I knew you not. And I know many people would know that the word know in that context is the gnosko word of knowing intimately. And what he's saying is that there's a reservation for devotion, for ones who have devoted their time, their life, their heart, their mind, soul, and body to the Lord. And there's no amount of work that could ever accomplish that outside of devotion first. I mean, if Mary of Bethany is only known for two things, sitting at his feet, pouring out her oil, she didn't have to be mentioned the rest of the Bible ever again. But her testimony of devotion will be mentioned for eternity. And we put so much judgment over union, thinking that like the judgment of union was left to us, and it isn't. I really I almost feel like pausing from like what we were talking about, so that we could make sure that that's addressed. Like if you're comparing, if you feel like you're looking at other people's life and you're like, man, they're doing so much more work than me, so like it's making me feel like I'm less devoted, you can't put that judgment on yourself.
Jonathan and Melissa Helser, when they first got married, Jonathan would like get up at 5 a.m. every morning, like read his Bible, spend his quiet time. And he saw that Melissa wasn't doing that all the time. And he went to the Lord and he was like, well, why doesn't she do it? And he was like, Jonathan, she doesn't give me only the first hour of her day. She gives me every hour of every day, because she's aware of my union with her and she lives her life that way. And so I think that's something that really impacted me. It's not a place, it's not a routine, it's not a work, like even a religious work that I can do that should come from an overflow of my union. It's about my attention and affection and my heart towards him, and realizing our union, and from that place going into whatever sphere and looking like Christ.
The thing that I'd like to also say as well, and then we'll close, is a quote by John Piper that says, missions exists because worship does not. And it was such a difficult thing for me, even as a believer, to justify, because I didn't want to minister to the Lord. I was willing to minister to everybody else because I thought I had enough. And I think you have helped me so much in seeing the importance and the beauty of solely ministering to him, and from that overflow ministering to others. And I gravitate towards seeing the finished work so that I can minister to him, be ministered by him, to minister to others. And that's what we need in many places around the world. People that know how to minister to him and worship him truly with true devotion, because then in those places there won't be a lack, because that will just start to spread like a wildfire.
He's attractive.
That's
and
good.
He is where he is loved. So we bless you guys, that we love you. We hope that you enjoyed it, and we'll see you guys next week. Bye.
Peace.